Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining today's panel, How to Create a Self-Service First Support Culture. I'll be your host, Kieran Doyle from ZoomIn Software. So before we get started, a few housekeeping items. First, we'll have time for questions at the end. You can enter your questions for panelists through the Q&A box. We'll have about 5 to 10 minutes for questions at the end, so please send those through as you have them. Next, we're not going to wait to the end to get some of your feedback. We're going to keep you engaged, excited, and probably off of Instagram by having some polls throughout the discussion to get your feedback and have our panelists react to that. The third housekeeping item is, yes, this will be recorded. You'll be getting an email over the next few days with a recording, so you could watch it again, send your colleagues, do whatever you like. So our agenda for today, first, we're going to be introducing and getting to know our panelists, why they care about this subject. Next, we're going to be diving into what is a self-service strategy, how to support and self-service work together, and who is self-service actually for. Next, we're going to be talking about some obstacles to the success of that self-service strategy. And last, we're going to be getting directly from the panelists their vision for self-service, for support, and for the organization as a whole. Again, we'll have time for Q&A, and we'll give the panelists some final thoughts to think about. So on to our panelists. Inbar, why don't you start? Give us a little bit of, tell the audience a little bit about your role, your organization, and why you care about this topic.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Inbar. I lead the Customer Success Enablement group here at Monday.com. So for any of you who don't know Monday.com, we're a company, we're creating a no-code system to support whatever thing you need to manage, project management, task management, and generally a work operating system. In my role, I'm responsible for customer education, and a large part of it is done by self-service. And we're talking about Customers Academy, we're talking about technical documentation of the product, and the community, the users community.
Oh, great. Okay, great. Steve, how about you?
Thanks, Aaron. Welcome, everybody. So my name is Steve Gaborik. I am the Director of Global Support for the SIS group within Cognyte Software. We provide a lot of web security, and my group specifically focuses on video security and situational awareness. We are primarily utilized within a ISOC, which is an Information Systems Operation Command and Control Center, utilized by airports, seaports, educational facilities, government facilities, basically to connect all the information that they're obtaining through video and any type of computer systems, bring it together and then provide them that information in a method that allows them to make actionable intelligence and really respond appropriately. So I have a global support desk that we support all of our customers across the world. So this is a very important topic for me and my team as we continue to work with our customers day in and day out.
Okay, great. And thank you both for being here. I'm Kieran Doyle. I'm Director of Product Marketing at ZoomIn. And if you haven't heard of ZoomIn, we're the ones setting a new standard for how customers experience technical documentation, making it easy for documentation teams to get the information out there and helping customers find information no matter where it lives in an organization. So we're all really deeply involved in care about self-service. And now we want to hear about you. So we're going to launch that first poll on kind of getting your feedback on what is your primary goal for self-service. Is it about, reducing cost, deflecting customers from going to support? Is it about meeting customer expectations? It's the kind of trendy thing to do. Is it about kind of the image that showing your brand is modern or innovative? Is it about creating a simplified, intuitive customer experience, a UX sort of play, about proactively addressing customer issues? Or is it about something else entirely? And you can enter that in the chat. As you respond to this first poll, let's look at the current state of support and self-service. So customers overwhelmingly prefer to self-serve, which shouldn't surprise anyone. These are from a Frost and Sullivan report that we did about a little less than a year ago. And I'm sure Steve is happy that not every customer is contacting him for every issue, that they do like to help themselves. So the left side, I think we're in agreement, is great. It's fine. The problem comes in on the right side. And it's that gap between what customers want to do and what they expect to be able to do. So customers don't have the confidence that they'll be able to self-serve effectively, and most of them are proven right by the inability to find what they need to resolve their issue. And that stat is around being able to find what they need in their first search. So let's close that poll and see what we can see. So it looks like with 44%, I'm just gonna see if I can drag this over here. And I can't, okay. So I'll just speak to this. So the primary goal of self-service, most people said creating a simplified and intuitive customer experience. That had 44%. And then in second place was reduced cost, deflect customers from going to support, and then tied for third, proactively addressing customer issues and meeting customer expectations. So Inbar, why don't you take this? Is this what you were thinking? Is this what you expected?
So I think yes. I think that for sure, creating simplified and intuitive customer experience is one of our main motivations to create self-service content. We do see a lot of traffic, and we notice this customer preferences. I would say that with time, we changed our approach for self-service. We started more around deflecting tickets and kind of the efficiency front. Mm-hmm. But with the evolvement of our thinking, we're now looking at the self-service as a component in our customer experience, and we want to expose more content and to make this experience last longing. Mm-hmm. It's not just a transactional interaction. You have a problem, here is the solution, but something that creates longer relationship between the company and the customers. Mm-hmm. Another thing that we see in this is basically get the data as a business driver. So when we're looking at search data, this is basically another pillar of the voice of the customer. Mm-hmm. We can assess knowledge gaps, not just by using support tickets, but also what our users are looking for. So we'll touch more data later, but this is definitely main motivation for us.
Yeah. So Steve, how about you? Did anything jump out at you?
No, and I have to agree a lot with Inbar. You know, I feel that in my experience, a lot of support organizations, especially, they start off with this trying to reduce costs, right? They're trying to find a way to minimize how many people they have manning the phones or following up and giving those customers that option. But as you really start to sink into this and utilize it, you realize that in order for customers to want to use it, it's not just putting it out there, but it's making it easy to use. It's making a seamless process so that, hey, I want to look for this and I can find it, as well as, well, I wasn't really able to find it. Can I seamlessly transition over to talking to someone or getting additional support as needed? So it really comes into where in the phase of the life cycle a company may be. A lot of that initial phase relies on cost and deflections, where to Inbar's point, as you get into that customer experience, you're really trying to grow that relationship. You're giving them multiple options, but it works well and it allows them to see the value of using it as opposed to just talking with someone whenever they have a question or a problem.
Yeah, and I expected the reduced cost to be a little bit higher, but
Yep.
it's almost like, as we saw in the sort of previous data point, that because customers so much want to self-serve, there's this mentality that self-service should be the primary way, and anything that goes to support is sort of, self-service is broken, or there's something wrong. Like, do you share that opinion, or do you see it as, these things are sort of working in conjunction, and it's not sort of a zero-sum game where it's self-service or support?
Definitely has to be married together. You've got to look at that across the board. And I know one of our attendees asked a question, how does that lead to retention, right? And it comes down to that customer experience. If a customer is able to easily find what they want, the cost of doing business is less for them, especially when they start comparing you to maybe other vendors or other partners that they're working with. They're going to want to come back to you. And if you offer maybe more products, they're going to want to reinvest with you, right? So you may start with one aspect and they see, hey, I get what I need and I don't have to wait for somebody. I can get this information, I can solve my problem, I can turn things around quickly and move on with my day, versus maybe I have to call somebody, I have to wait on hold for 45 minutes with another partner. So as you build that experience, you make it better, you make it more seamless and more efficient for them. As long as it's providing good experiences and good exposure, they're going to want to continue that relationship. They're want to, if you have one of my, my company has multiple products, they can really flow together. And while they may start with a smaller project, it allows them to grow and expand. That's a really good customer retention tool and growth opportunity for the business itself.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think part of the issue is, and we'll get to this later, I think you mentioned this, Inbar, is it's very easy to see if you deflected something, well, like you can immediately see that happening, but creating a better experience, like that's a little bit hard to measure. I know I don't want to jump ahead, but that's, that's something you'll see in a few minutes. So the next question I have is, so how do you balance the needs of support and self-service? So how do you make sure that you are elevating both, and you know when to apply, when to deflect, and when to give them that option? Inbar, do you want to, I'm sorry, the option to go to support. Inbar, do you want to jump in on this one?
Yeah, of course. So at Monday, basically, we're treating self-service as another support channel. So we're now offering multiple support channels. We're also going to increase the number of channels that we offer. And we're not necessarily look at self-service, again, as a tool for, lower cost or to deflect tickets. We think that this is something that is part of the service that we want to provide. These are part of the tools that we can invest in to make our users much more knowledgeable and self-sufficient. So this is why we're doing that.
Mm-hmm.
We don't balance between the both, but we do make sure that everything goes together. So speaking in one voice, being able to, use our tickets as a point of reference for our self-service, and the other way around. So making sure that people can submit tickets even when they're looking at our self-service resources, which is something that we haven't done before, because when we looked at self-service as a tool to deflect tickets, it wasn't straightforward to also expose the contact me, the contact us button. But right now, this is what we're doing because we want to encourage our users. If you haven't gotten the specific answer to your need, here you can read the articles or take the courses that we created for you. But also, if you still have questions, reach out to us, and we have a human that can, communicate with you. And as Steve said before, this is something that we want to see working together to increase customer satisfaction and to make sure we are using the self-service as a tool for retention.
Yeah. So I think kind of tying into that idea is, if you're giving customers so many options and channels to contact you, how do you kind of staff that up? How do you align your organization to be able to kind of make that happen? Do you create the ideal first, or do you kind of take the pieces you have and kind of put them into place and then sort of see what works and what doesn't work over time?
That's for me?
Sure.
So I would say that we have a self-service strategy, and we build our organization to match it. And the reason why I say that is because we are differentiating between different resources that address different needs. And I'll be specific. So we know that in order to understand the system logic and how to approach and create a new workflow in Monday.com, you need to understand some logic. This is something that we address by our courses that are much more user-centric, and they're basically explaining how to implement and how to work with Monday in a very conceptualized way. Then we can take the starting point and address specific question of what features are available and how do you work, like all the how-tos, if it's articles, if it's videos. These are things that we address in our technical documentation, in our knowledge base. And then if our users have specific questions on their implementation, on their specific workflows that they use, and they need, not just the generic knowledge of what the system offers, but exactly how to use it and how to apply that to their use case, this is where they can get help from other users, and of course, some moderation from the Monday side in our community. So basically, we have a strategy, we see how all the gears kind of work together, and then we build a team to support this structure and this strategy.
Got it. So Steve, from the support perspective, how do you kind of make the organization align to what your self-service strategy is?
It's definitely an evolution. We've got several years in the business. And so when things started, right, you didn't have self-service options. So we were built very much for phone support, right? Traditional type call centers, supporting that way. So what happens for us is we've really had to take what parts do we have, what can we implement, and start working through it over time. And we've had to evolve not only our strategy, but our vision to align with that, which requires investment in technology, investment in other resources that we are not always able to do right up front. So we've had to go through more of a progression where we said, well, here's what we're currently offering. Here's where we envision us getting to and what we want to be able to offer our customers. And it's really breaking that down step by step and how we can implement that, and coming back to having that overall vision and strategy so that it is a seamless interface that customers, to Inbar's point, I'm going to look on that self-service. I'm going to go to that portal. I want to do that self-service option, try to find what I can. But if I can't find it, or if I have additional questions that I don't feel are being answered, can I easily transition over and open a ticket, call somebody, contact them? I know one of my pet peeves is when I'm working on a website and I can't find an easy way to contact somebody, right? Because I love doing things on my own, but when I need to talk to somebody, I want to make it available. You're not trying to hide it. And that goes more into the culture, right? You want to be providing that best experience for the customer. And so you have to build everything around that. And it takes steps. Most companies, especially larger companies, aren't going to be able to do that overnight. But it's making sure you have that unified vision on where you need to get to, what you're seeing as being successful with customers, that you're currently doing, what things they're still asking for, and you continue implementing to constantly grow that experience and make it better.
Yeah, that's great. And I think one thing that we're seeing more and more is the sort of due diligence before they become a customer of, I'm going to go to the site, I'm going to see what information is out there, and I'm going to see how hard it is to get help if I have an issue. So really walking through the paces of being a customer before they, make that purchase, so it's a more informed decision. But I think that leads to, okay, we've got our strategy, and I think all well and good until we run into some obstacles. So the next part we're going to be talking about, what's getting in the way of achieving our self-service vision. So I'm just going to read these out. So is it we don't have a business case, we can't justify the investment? Is there a lack of clear data or metrics that define our strategy? Is it a lack of clear data or metrics to show the success of that strategy? Is it lack of organizational alignment on the self-service as a priority? Or is it a lack of customer trust in them being able to self-serve effectively, which we saw from the earlier stat? Or if there's something else, please enter it in the chat. I'm just going to be talking through just some obstacles to self-service today. So this is where we're seeing self-service break down for the customer. So the first way that customers aren't getting self-service success is you're not where customers are looking, which is Google, whichever search engine. They go there first. As beautiful as your marketing sites are, or your documentation sites are, people are just going to do what they always do. And if you're not there, that's going to impact them being able to find what they need. So let's say they do find what they need, they get to your site, but the information isn't where they expect, or they can't get in your head to see where you think the information belongs. So certain information is going to live on a community or a documentation site or a developer portal. To them, it doesn't make sense. They don't know what you're thinking of where different information goes, so they can't find what they need, even though they're getting very close to the right location. And then finally, they get to the information they were looking for, but they can't resolve the issue either because they have the wrong version, the documentation is missing steps, there's conflicting information, or your site or digital space doesn't have the functionality to resolve the issue. So these don't live in any one discipline. This really crosses marketing, IT support, product documentation. And it may be showing that maybe alignment, organizational alignment is the issue. And in terms of justifying the business case, it seems like from what we're seeing, again, from that Frost and Sullivan report, the data is there to support the business case. From what we saw in that Frost and Sullivan report, a little more than half of the issues solved by a support team used existing documentation, which means that there was no innate knowledge that a support rep had. They used existing documentation that was out there that the customer should have been able to get to. So that sounds like a pretty good justification for a investment. So let's close that poll, take a look at what the audience said, what their main obstacles are. Wow, lack of organizational alignment has 50%. So it seems like that's a big one. In a distant second place, we have building the business case and customer trust in self-service effectiveness. And the rest, had pretty low information or a low response rate for lack of clear data for strategy, success. So yeah, so Steve, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts? Does that make sense? Lack of organizational alignment? Would you agree with that audience feedback?
I think it does. Once again, it comes down to where companies are in the process. That is probably the biggest obstacle up front, right? Because if it's not something that is part of your culture, something you've started from the get-go, you've got to produce some kind of organizational shift to make that a priority. And while people that may be on the support team per se see that as, hey, I could eliminate probably a third or half of these tickets by giving the people I work with more information to put in front of them. It's how do you get that voice to more senior leadership if you've got to make that cultural change. In other companies, if it starts up at the top and this is something that they're realizing, you have that support. And then the next challenges, I would say, is kind of the top three that we put in the poll is building that business case and putting data together. It's challenging to show in some cases, unless you have the tools that are specifically designed for it, to say, well, how do I do this? Or what could it provide me? Or if I am starting to do this, am I getting deflections? Am I able to track this? Or is it just a gut feeling? And without any real way to measure it, it's hard to say that if maybe an initial investment or initial change is providing any success. And so that's really where you have to get at least enough buy-in with leadership in order to say, okay, we need to go for this. We've got to put at least some kind of investment into it, because we need to be clear on how can we track it and how can we measure success. Because a lot of companies, when they try to start doing this, they would say, yeah, it's great, we need to do this. And then they have no way to measurement. So a year, 2 years down the road, they're like, well, was our investment worthwhile? Is anything happening? Have we seen any differences? And then you also have a bunch of other factors that could contribute to that, right? You have a growing customer base, right? You have growing projects. So you're going to have, maybe your numbers are the same as far as support volumes, but your number of customers has grown, which is, and if you're not comparing those, it's like, well, our support numbers didn't drop. Well, maybe they have, but you're growing your customer base, so you have more volume, and they're still using more self-support tools to keep that number flat versus a bigger growth. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a real important part, depending on where you are. And with my organization, I was lucky enough when we started doing this, it was definitely driven from the top down. Whereas other companies, especially when they're smaller, you're trying to push that up, and you've got to really provide justification on why we should start this process, and then find the tools when you do that to show that, yes, it's working, and here's why we should continue to invest in it and grow this opportunity, because it is providing these kinds of results.
Got it. Inbar, how about you? Did anything kind of jump out at you about the poll results there?
Yeah, so actually, as Steve said, we were lucky enough to have two factors in our favor. First of all, I think that the management was very well understood of why do we need it. It actually came from them. So in terms of top down, that was actually the case. The other factor that I think is very significant here is the fact that the product itself of Monday.com is a very self-service product. So, and the way it was sold and marketed from the get-go was of self-service. So it doesn't make sense to create a different experience for purchasing the product and supporting the product. This is why from basically, day one, we had our documentation site, and we started looking at a lot of self-service videos and other resources. And in that term, when the company evolved, the product evolved, our customer body grew, we were able to just maintain and grow our self-service resources with that. So again, that was a very good opening point for us as a team. I think that where we're at right now, our main obstacle is the lack of data, because we got to a point where we have multiple tools working in multiple platforms. And right now, our biggest problem, both in terms of the user experience and the insights that we can get from, as a company, from our self-service, is that each platform, each self-service channel kind of works in silos. And our challenge is to get a unified approach and get all the data from the different channels to work together.
Mhm.
So in terms of improving our resources, improving the customer experience, the lack of data is our main obstacle, because we don't know enough on what we need to do to improve everything.
Got it. So we may have basically answered, or you may have each of you answered this one a little bit, but if there was one obstacle that we shared that you could overcome, which one is sort of the most important and which one should you handle first if they're not the same? So is it about getting that organizational alignment first and then you can worry about the data later? Or is it about, getting the data, building the business case and do it in sort of a water flow sort of method?
So I think you're going to have to build it out first, because it's really difficult. You can have estimates, but you're not really going to have the data until you start implementing it. So I think it's really important to have a strong plan that you say, we're going to do this, but also define some way to measure it, right? Whether, I think one of the chats was, it's not necessarily always about cost savings, right? It's about experience and time savings, meaning how much time maybe am I saving my support staff and what they're having to do on a day-to-day basis? What kind of time am I saving my customers? Meaning they can find an answer in 5 minutes versus 15, and finding ways to measure that and quantify it to align with your strategy.
Got it. Inbar, how about you? If you had to pick one.
For sure, right now, for sure, the data. I agree with Steve. You need to start and build something, and you need to run with it for a time before you can, look at what you have and how to improve it. But right now, I would for sure, we need to improve data collection, defining top level KPIs, and so on.
So that brings me to my next question, which is it okay not to have the data? So if it is okay to have the data, if it's okay not to have the data, how do you make that work? And if it's not okay not to have the data, if that makes sense, what's the best way to get that data if you don't have it today?
So to me, it varies based on the company maturity. Steve touched it a few times before. I think that we have data from other resources, right? We know from our tickets where is our users' knowledge gaps, and this is our maybe initial source of where do we need to start, alongside with the product roadmap. So we do know, as the self-service professionals in the company, what is about to be released and what do we need to offer to our users. In that sense, it's okay not to have the data because you have a firm starting point. But in order to improve it, in order to make sure that the self-service experience is advanced, and that goes to personalized experience, that goes to content suggestions, and being proactive in your self-service. These are places that you must have data to provide an advanced experience. And if you do want to go to high-end self-service, you need the data for it.
All right, Steve, how about you? Okay, to not have
I
the
completely
data?
agree. Only at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
A lot of places aren't going to have it at the beginning, but if you want to continue to improve, if you want to find the new areas to invest in, and maybe certain experiences that you're not capturing, you're not going to find that without some kind of data. You've got to have some way to measure your progress, some way to measure your customer experience and their feedback. All of that, in order to make better decisions, you really need the data. So you can start with a plan, you can start with a vision and a goal and start working towards that without much data. But once you're on that path, data is going to be critical.
Got it. Okay. Taking us into our third section, we're going to give the audience a little break, give you some time to enter your questions into the Q&A. And we're going to go right to our panelists to ask them about their strategy. So what is your vision for self-service? End goal, ideal, perfect vision. And then what are you doing now? What are the incremental steps to get you there? Inbar, do you want to take this one first?
Sure. So for us, the high-end experience, this is what we're trying to achieve this year. And again, we're talking about personalized content, proactive suggestions, and maybe one of the most important components is contextual support. And what it means is that we are working, and this is like the answer to your second question, we are working on improving our user experience in two different dimensions. One is to combine all of our self-service channels under one hub, working with a powerful search engine to create federated search across all of our resources, and making the search experience and discoverability much better than it used to be. The other dimension is bringing the content to the user. So unlike the current experience where we need to, when a user has a question or has a need in content, they go to Google, as you mentioned before, or go to our help center. We want to bring the content to the user in the platform and give the user the content that they need based on how they use the platform, the actual Monday.com platform. And this is our main goal for 2022, to capture what our users are doing, how do they behave with the platform, and match the right content for that.
Okay, great. So it sounds like hyper personalization, if I can throw in a buzzword. Is that an accurate label?
I don't know if it's a hyper, but personalized content for sure.
Okay. Hyper just makes it sound more, flashy, but that's okay. Steve, how about you?
Yes, so we are on a similar path this year. We have been analyzing our repositories, basically. We have found we have multiple locations where data is stored. And what that does is makes a very confusing experience for our customers. To your point earlier, it's like, is it in this developer community? Is it in this partner community? Is it in this other library? So one of our key areas of focus this year is really identifying what are all these different silos that data is held, and working to bring those together so that we have a unified interface, so that when a customer comes in, they can find all the information in one spot. They have access to support aspects in addition to that. So they have documentation together with that support experience based on what they need, and bringing that together seamlessly. That is our big task this year, because we've got, to Inbar's point too, we're also trying to, once we bring that data together, being able to make those recommendations. They start looking on a topic, or they start saying, hey, I have this issue, when they want to work with support, and start making those recommendations. Oh, well, we have these articles or these topics and publications that would address these, and more fine-tuned, like not only is it in this article, but digging it more granularly, it's in part of this section of this document. So really trying to identify the information faster for them, provide a unified, and Inbar said a federated search experience. So for us, I don't want it to be federated. I want to bring everything together in one spot versus having to search across, 3, 4, 5 platforms for them to find it. I want it to look the same, interact the same, access the same. Everything is very cohesive, is our big task for this year with our customers
Okay.
and our self-service.
That sounds great. You're speaking my language. So now we're going to move over to the Q&A. We have a bunch of questions, and I'm just going to say we probably won't get to them all. If we don't get to your question, one of us will follow up with you, but let's just kick this off. So first one, how do you build a business case for self-service investment if not based on reducing support costs? So Inbar, do you want to take that one first? If not, you can hand over to Steve.
Yeah. No.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that, again, we were lucky enough to have our management understanding the need in self-service just from the get-go. And again, it wasn't a matter of building case or justifying the investment, because it went very well with the product. I do think that you can do it without ticket deflection if one of your top level KPIs is customer satisfaction. And in that case, if you have a strong CSAT survey or an NPS survey asking about self-service support, and you can bring qualitative feedback from your customers on, if that's missing, that can be a good starting point to building this use case without only relying on ticket deflection.
Steve, any way besides reducing support costs that you see in the short term?
Yeah, honestly, I don't even look at this as reducing support costs, because this is not one of those opportunities where you can say, hey, if I implement this, I don't need these many people, right? I can go from 15 down to 10. It rarely works that way. Usually what you're looking at is you can focus on the customer experience, as Inbar said. That is going to be a big aspect, right? How are they satisfied with working with your support team? What are your objectives? Are we providing world-class customer support? And if that's the case, what makes up world-class support, right? It means quickly answering questions. It means customers are not spending extra time waiting on somebody maybe to call them back. Improving all those different aspects, and self-service goes as part of that. Really what I see too is, as you start implementing this, as I spoke before, you're going to be able to better manage your growth too, right? It's going to bring more opportunities. As your company can grow, you're able to take on those additional customers, those additional projects, without having to incrementally grow your team as well. So it's really hard to contract and make a cost saving, especially based on personnel and headcount, whereas the workload can be more distributed. It can also help alleviate some of the spikes where, if you've got a good self-service portal, maybe you have a new release and you know that you can have your documentation out there and you can have these other pieces of information that are readily available. A lot of software companies may see spikes, right? I've got a new release. Spikes come in because customers aren't used to it. There's big changes, but if you can get that in front of people, you can also help smoothen those transitions so you're not seeing as big of an impact on your teams.
Got it. So that ties into, there's a few questions on measurement. I'll try to cobble them together into one mega question. So how do you measure the impact of a better customer experience? How do you measure self-service success? You're driving something better. So is there a killer metric to rule them all? Or what is the sort of mixture of metrics that you're using? Steve, want to start with you?
Definitely. So ours is a combination. I don't think when it comes to self-service, there's really one metric you can rely on completely. Deflections is a big part of it, where if a customer comes in and wants to work with the support team, how many times do they deflect and actually given the information they need so they don't have to follow through with that. To the other part is, if you're looking at customer experience or things like that, you really got to survey and talk with your customers. It's not something that you're going to get really out of the tools, right? I can't always say that how was your experience? That can be difficult to do without actually working with the people that are using the system, understanding their experience. And that takes some effort too, whether it's through a survey. You can do rankings on the actual documents. So when you can see which type of documents have the best rankings. So it's like, well, maybe we need to invest more in this type of document because people are really finding this useful. It's helping to answer more of their questions versus maybe another section of documentation or information that is there and maybe it's good, but it's either less utilized for one reason or another. So having ways to track what's being accessed is important. Feedback from the customers themselves as much as you can get, measuring some kind of deflections and how much the self-service side is being used is going to be important. And if you have multiple areas that are part of that self-service, whether it's finding documents or whether it's depending on your product, could be something else, knowing which area they're using and focusing on is going to be important too, because that can also help drive where your focus should be and where additional investments may need to come to.
Mm-hmm. Inbar, how about you?
Our measurement works pretty much along the lines that Steve described. We are looking at like the volume and the views that we're getting and making sure that people really consume the resources that we prepare. We're also looking at customer satisfaction. And again, we're like ranking specific articles. We are measuring, we're looking at the ratio. We have an option to vote up or vote down, and we are measuring the ratio between them. Another thing that we're doing, again, as Steve explained, is getting the feedback from our customers. So we have surveys and we do speak with our users, with a sample of our users. We interview them on their experience. And these interviews give us very important insights because I think that when you look at quantitative data and views, you mainly see how people work with the existing resources. But with the interviews, first of all, you can identify maybe gaps and missing resources. But moreover, you're going to get feedback on the format of the different resources that you use. And this is how we, for example, found out that we need to improve the quality of a specific type of resources. And that was very, very valuable. And we do see improvement in our KPIs after we changed the format.
Nice. So we'll do two more questions because I do want to end a little bit before the end of the hour, just to give people a little breather before their next meeting. So Steve, we'll start this one with you. Do you have any, and again, I'll just paraphrase, apologies to those who asked, but is there any cultural difference that you see in adoption of self-service? Is North America more likely to self-serve than Europe or Asia? Is this sort of something that you need to focus on if you're focused on a certain market, or is this truly a global trend?
So in my experience, what we've seen is self-service has been a little more dominant in North America. However, I will kind of put a caveat on that because the majority of information that's being shared is in English. So unless you're able, and even with a large global company, it can be difficult to translate everything. While English is fairly dominant across the world, it does exclude some regions that have more of a challenge. So one of the things that I find is you really have to assess your areas. So while the majority of our, maybe all of our documentation is going to be in English, we also do translations into certain other areas. So we found that, depending on where our markets are, whether that's in the CALA region, for example, we do have like some type of Spanish translations and certain things. We also may find that there's a reason to do a translation in maybe into Hebrew if you've got a big market in Israel. You really need to understand your markets, though. One of the other aspects that I've seen is in North America, using the phone to get support has been more prominent as well. Whereas internationally, we've seen a lot more people that are interested in doing chat or email, things of that nature, and for communication, as opposed to just picking up the phone and calling somebody. While they may not necessarily do self-service where they find it themselves, they tend to lean more on, hey, I'm happy to send an email or I can chat with somebody online, as opposed to directly speaking with them over the phone. So it really does come down to which markets you're working in and really trying to assess them. So from our point of view with my company and my team, we really invest in that digital communication with email, chat, those types of things for the international market especially. And while we still have that available outside of self-service, the phone is more prominent in North America. So it's take some time to really see what you're going to be exposed to, and really understanding the markets and the regions they're in.
Got it. So Inbar, how about you? Are you seeing this as sort of a global trend, or are there any hotspots that are adopting faster?
So I think that for us, geography hasn't been a big differentiator on consuming self-service. It's pretty international trend. The points where we see difference is more about the different user roles. So we see that our developers population uses much more self-service than our end users. And it's important to say, to Steve's point, is that we do invest in localized content. So maybe that can explain the difference.
Got it. So last question, and again, we'll follow up with you because we have a whole bunch of questions still to get to. This was sort of an interesting one, if I can find it. So what is the type of incentive you propose to your customers to motivate them to perform self-service? That's sort of an interesting one. Like, do you need to entice them to get them over that sort of hesitation? Or do you think having these offerings is just, they're going to take them up and sort of be off to the races? Steve, you want to go first?
Sure. So from my side, we don't offer any real incentives. We focus on that customer experience, and it is a thing that our teams promote as well, right? So when they do call in, especially if someone's asking and it's easily found in a document, we try to say in a friendly way that, yeah, here's your answer to the question. By the way, it's in this document. I want to send it to you. Are you aware of our, customer portal where you can get a lot of this information? We're always happy to work with you, but if you ever need to get it, from your phone or, while you're out in the field or doing something, it's readily available at your fingertips as well. So I think it comes to a lot of promotion, really, where you're letting the customers that are calling in know, like, hey, we have this service, we have it available. Here's all the great things they can do about it. We're always here to help you, but you can also do this stuff on your own whenever you want to, 24/7, without having to pick up a phone and spend that time. So for us, it's more of an educational and exposure side of thing versus, hey, if you use, this self-support portal, we're going to give you a discount on this or what may be. There's not really a financial incentive on our side. It's more of that experience and making it better for them.
Yeah. How about you, Inbar? Like, including, incentive doesn't necessarily have to be financial. Gamification, points, badges, awards. Are you guys doing anything, or is just sort of creating awareness, like Steve said, of time savings? Is that enough of its own reward?
I agree with Steve. So it's mostly about the experience. I think that when self-service really provides value, you have an up-to-date documentation, you cover all, the little nuances in your product, you provide good quality and good experience, not in discovering the content or just, have it available anytime, anywhere. But also investing in creating around, as I said before, the right formats. We changed the nature of our webinars, for example. We moved from 30-minute webinars into on-demand mini webinar series. So cutting our live webinars when they are on demand to really short videos to make them much more accessible and to make the experience easier to consume, right?
Mm-hmm.
These are the incentives that we're looking at. We are looking into gamify what we're doing, but this is not our main goal.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that when customers sees value and being able to answer their questions, they come back.
Okay. Well, that is all the time we have for Q&A. So I just wanted to, first of all, thank you both for being here. Final thoughts, in a minute or less, Steve, I'm going to start with you on, what are some tips or takeaways on how to create a self-service first support culture? What should people start thinking about?
Definitely. So you got to get started. It's one of those where you have to at least take the first step, and wherever you are, you look at the tools that you have and what you can at least start with, and you should start there. As you make that step, just make sure you have a strong vision for where you want to get to. It's not, it's not an overnight process. It takes time. It takes a lot of effort. But as long as you have that vision, you take the first step and you work within, to build it as part of your culture, it's going to drive success. There's a lot of pieces that go into it, but customers are going to appreciate it and it's going to provide value to the business.
Great. Inbar?
Along these lines, you can distribute the work. I know that, looking at the mission of establishing a self-service, it can, you can perceive it as something very, very big. But I think that if you have even the support agents being able to provide short articles, FAQs to be the basis of your knowledge base, it doesn't necessarily have to take a lot of efforts to set up the initial knowledge base. And for like young companies, this is where I would start with just documenting very, very simply.
Okay. Well, again, thank you both for your insights. Thank you to our audience for their feedback and keeping us on our toes with those poll questions. So we have one more survey at the end. Just tell us, did you learn something new? Did you, was this all stuff you knew already? Maybe you should be on the next one. What should we talk about next? And any other feedback you have. So again, thank you for joining us and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you all.
Thanks.